Hi, welcome to CCTV Time Machine. We're taking a look back at the archives through some of the folks that we find in the archives. And I have the pleasure to know Bill Mayers as an acquaintance. It's hard to live in this town and not know Bill Mayers in one capacity or another, either learning a little bit about beekeeping from him or drinking some of the House of Fermentology delicacies, deliciousness. Bill, we are looking into the CCTV archives, and tell me just a little bit about what the archives means to you, or how you connect with CCTV as an organization. How did you come to connect with this organization?
Well, I can't say I walked in the door and said, "Film me." I mean, I think it was somebody at the beginning who said, we want to do, and I mean, this is going to be an experience for me to see how you put me on your film.
Yeah.
But I have been a friend of Lauren Glenn's, I mean, almost since we came to Burlington, and have always really liked this whole, what she's and the rest of you have created. And so it's part of really the civic fabric of Burlington, and so to be a small part of it is terrific.
Yeah, I am always kind of astounded when I hear about somebody doing something notable, and I look in our archives and I'm like, oh, and you know, just the other day I'm like going through, oh, there's my sister in the archives from, you know, I mean, just like wild and crazy synchronicities.
Well, it's a wonderful time to, I mean, with the excuse of having an anniversary, to look back on what you've done, and you don't have to justify it any other way than say this is really pretty cool.
Yeah, it is pretty cool. Well, I have some clips lined up here from sort of furthest back in time. Of course, CCTV, this is our 40th year. CCTV as an institution began in 1984 with a kind of connection of Nat Air and Lauren Glenn. Nat was out with a video camera recording everything he got his hands on. Yep. And Lauren Glenn had kind of the knowledge and the know-how around this telecommunications infrastructure to pressure the cable companies and the folks who were borrowing our public right-of-way and return some of those resources to the community. And they married their skills together to create this organization. And this is a clip from 1985. It's the Burlington Progressives Entrepreneurship Forum. I guess, you know, at the beginning, maybe you can tell us a little bit about what you remember of the Sanders administration in 1985 and how they were supporting or not growing businesses in the community.
Well, they set up the CEDO office. That was the first major thing, and I think Peter Clavel was the director of that. And the guy I got to know best was Bruce Cipher, who really was kind of the mid-husband for dozens of businesses around the city particularly. And I had just co-authored a book about workplace democracy. And so he put together a project called, it was a city report called, I can't remember, but it was Working for People or something like that.
This is Bruce Cipher.
Yeah, Bruce Cipher.
Yeah, and he did a lot of work on the Pine Street
yes, well, he and I and Steve Conant and a couple of artists, and well, there was about 6 of us. We started the Pine Street Business Association 31 years ago.
Yeah.
And that was supported. I mean, and Bruce was kind of I won't say a Geppetto, but he was, he was working from the city side to help this to move along. And so it was pretty exciting. So this entrepreneurship forum was, I think, 2 years after our book had come out. And I think, well, it was before the Pine Street Association was started. But it was pretty exciting, and a couple of people I knew from Cambridge, Mass. came up for it. And but this came under the stewardship of the Sanders administration.
Yeah, great. Let's play a little clip from this. Now, Kevin, I think there's something going on with the framing of this, but we'll figure that out. I'm going to go ahead and play this
That
clip.
was, I believe, 1977, that Vermont
Hear it?
Asbestos Group was sold to its employees by GAF, I believe, was the conglomerate corporation. That was, in this era, this modern era,
Can you hear
which
it?
I think
A little
actually
bit?
Vermont Asbestos in some sense was one of the very first companies.
Oh, this is a guy named Chris.
This happened a lot back in the late 19th century.
And you
but
can
this
keep
was one of
talking
the
over
first
this if
companies
you'd
in
like.
this
Okay,
era
well, this is a guy who
direction.
works for the
There
Industrial,
were a lot of
or
very
works for the Industrial
ill-informed
Cooperative
people,
Association in
particularly
Cambridge.
the workers.
Chris,
The workers were told almost
can't remember
overnight.
his
He's
name.
talking about
what
the
happened
Asbestos
and what their
Corporation.
rights were and what their
Right.
rights weren't. And it was a very top-down.
And who, do you
management
recognize
control
anybody in that
process.
corner?
yeah, this is Scudder Parker.
The
Yeah,
company
right in the
did
front there.
Center,
amazingly
yeah,
well.
and there's
For
Peter.
a phaser,
Peter
and
Clavell
actually
right
told me
behind him.
because
And
we
then
Me.
you were
wrote about it.
right there by the Town
company
Meeting
did
TV logo
amazingly
in the
well
front corner.
I think by this time I'm
Part because
in the
the
legislature,
asbestos
so I
And in part
tried to
because
dress
of
up a little
productivity
more.
associated with
Your
employee
bow ties.
ownership.
When did you
But
start
because
wearing
of
the
poor
signature
structure
bow
that was
tie?
used in that
When I
case,
was
because of the lack of
my
education
first
and
year,
information and
because
trust
I liked bow
that the
ties,
employees didn't
and I'd
have
worn them off and
going
on in college, but I thought,
When
here's a
push
way
came to shove, when it came to a
of
tight
standing out, because
situation,
there's nobody
workers
else in the
basically
house,
said,
150
"Look, we
people,
don't have
who
control over this place.
wore a bow
We don't
tie, so
really
I could
have
always say, well, I'm the guy with a bow
We're
tie.
nervous about
Yeah.
this. We're not quite sure what's going to happen.
I'm going to
here."
clip
And the
ahead because
Couple hours.
there's where you talk.
No, I'll just add a couple points to that. One fact you did mention is just normal human greed. Their original shares they bought for $50 and they were sold for $2,000, and it went that high in 2.5 years. And so there was a desire of any normal human being, capitalist or otherwise, to recoup on your investment. There's that. There's also the question of education, just not being prepared for the requirements of participatory working. And there was no model. There's no instruction within the company. They had no other.
Do you remember what you're talking about?
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
talking about Vermont Asbestos, yeah.
Okay.
There's also a factor of just how the ownership shares were divided. I mean, one guy had 100 shares that became worth $200,000, and then other people had maybe 5 shares or 2 shares. So there's a real spread of economic interest in the success of the company. And I think that it was, and then there's one other factor that
You're getting into the
where
weeds.
they did have
Yeah.
employees.
Well, it was a serious
I think
conference.
It's
Yeah.
a little misleading to say worker-owned. And I've always been a little bit nervous about saying companies are worker-owned. It's a little bit better to say employee-owned, because a lot of companies have managers and workers own the firms. I think when you say worker-owned, it automatically puts a class.
Pretty
over
intelligent guy.
that isn't always justified. But in the case of Vermont
That's true.
you had union representatives under the old system who became board members.
So I'm going to pause this. This is in the
So-
archives. This is 1985. This is one of our earliest things. And, you know, there's something sort of magical about democracy, which is time, ideas, communication, and then a reflection period. So I wonder, looking back at that, how do you respond to that? I mean, pretty intelligent guy. What impact
Well, I
were
think,
you having
well,
on
it
that?
just
Yeah.
in terms of what we're talking about right now.
Yeah.
And what is the title of your of this? It's
Time Machine.
Well, no, but it's the something and democracy. This is the,
Center for Media and Democracy.
yeah, media and democracy. So
Yeah.
here is an example in which I get to participate in a small way in talking about workplace democracy,
Yeah.
which has always had a romance to it as an idea, but has always been really difficult in different circumstances to carry out.
Yeah.
And all things, various things happen along the way. And so what we were trying to do in this book was to describe a range of workplaces in the late 70s, early 80s. Most of them succeeded in some way, but never fully,
Yeah.
unless they had already started as with a cultural devotion to cooperation.
Yeah.
And there were only really 2 places that we could find. One was in the lumber co-ops in the northwest of the United States, and then particularly among the people in the Basque region of Spain and around Mondragon.
Interesting.
But those were very special circumstances.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, it was fun to be on the screen, and I wasn't thinking, well, this is the name of what you guys are going to be.
Yeah, yeah.
But it is a reinforcement of reflections
Yeah.
on democracy in the society.
Yeah, and the fact that this was happening in City Hall, that it was
Yeah.
coming from CETO, this important support of community entrepreneurship that
Yep.
was about.
And Bruce is the one that put this on.
Yeah, neat. When you did start House of Fermentology, and that was not the first business that you started in your life,
Well,
but,
yeah, really it is.
okay. Did you employ workplace democracy?
Well, we only had 2 people.
There were 2 of you. Got it. This is a clip. What's interesting, Nat Ayer, who did a lot of our archiving, worked really hard at detailing and adding metadata to programs. And your name is in this program, but I scrubbed through this and I can't find you here. I don't know if I'm mistaken, but this is, I thought it was interesting anyway, just to see Madeline Cunin as
Great to have a chance to get together, and I'm impressed
in her early days.
with the size of the turnout. They're out
This
to
is a
see
Democratic Party
our
fundraiser.
senator here. We're
Before
really
she
happy
got
that
elected?
we can both
I mean,
share
is this when
podium
she was
together.
running for office?
This is
in the positions we
1984,
hold,
so
and
she
I
must
think
have
we're
either
both up
just
here largely
become
'cause
governor
all of
or,
you have
no,
been out
1985,
there,
so she's already
She's
governor.
just
to
become
enable
governor,
us,
yeah.
to be elected and hopefully to be reelected. And it's really the commitment of the people in the audience.
Well, the
that
cool
makes it
thing
all
is,
possible. I know it's an
I've
old
got,
cliche
I
that you
held her
need the
seat.
grassroots and
Tell me about that.
people that
Well,
help you go door to door
I lived in
and
the
identify the
South
voters
End,
get out the
and
vote.
she
And you've heard it
she
time
lived in
and
the
time
South
again,
End,
but it
and
just
it was a
so
2-person
happens
district.
that cliche is
And
absolutely
when
right.
she
So we're
ran for
very
lieutenant
fortunate
governor, I mean, she had stopped running, but then there were 2 incumbents. There was a guy named Bill Blanchard,
that now we're at a time
Bob Blanchard's brother, and Mary Avelti, and they were the incumbents. And so when she stepped up to run for governor, I decided the only way I was going to get in was I had to run against 2 Democrats, so Mary Avelti and Bill Blanchard. So I worked, Bill Blanchard. And so I worked very hard, and I walked the district twice and took a son on my back, and I won. I mean, I won the
You
primary.
ran as a Democrat, or did you run
Yeah.
as a,
Yeah. And then I ran, then he ran, this guy was a spoil sport, so he ran again in the general election. I beat him again. So then I went into the House when she became governor.
Yeah.
And I was there just as long as she was governor for 6 years.
Got it, great. Yeah, 1984, because I was probably a 16-year-old and I
Yeah.
worked on her campaign. I was so excited to be seeing a woman take up a leadership
Yeah.
role. What was that like to be in the legislature at that time? Or what do you remember for those 6 years?
Oh, well,
What were you
I
working
mean, I
on?
wrote a lot of, I wrote a long essay about it. I remember, I remember the excitement of all the stuff, but I also realized I was not a really good politician, that my skin was too thin.
Yeah, tell me, what does that mean? What makes a good politician?
You got to be willing to plow on through, and if people disagree with you or take shots at you, fair or foul,
Yeah.
you got to just move on. And I just felt, well, I'd worked hard on what I'm doing, and that, because I'd been a reporter before that, and I actually preferred to be a reporter. I'm probably in there somewhere.
You might have been in there. Gina Sullivan there
Yeah.
and some other folks.
Oh, and that's Tommy. Can't remember his last name.
I think they're introducing some folks
Yeah.
that are going to it is true, they did introduce the legislators, but I didn't see you. And then who's this at the podium?
That's John. I think John Tracy.
It looked a little like John Tracy. Well, we'll zoom in on him at the end here, but there was quite a showing. And then at the end, oh, it is John Tracy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is John Tracy. And then Leahy, of course, down here to the right.
And the blue is what's her name? Jean Sullivan?
Yep. And then this guy was on, what's his name in the gray hair? He was on CAX, I feel like.
Was he a reporter? Oh,
He's
yes,
a
yes.
reporter, yeah.
Oh, God. And he's talking to, oh, my God,
I know, right?
Jack out of the past.
Jack. His name is
Oh,
Jack.
Jack.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, right. Jack, not Jack LeDuc, but Jack.
Thurston?
No, but there was a Thurston. But
Yeah.
Jack.
This is one of the coolest things about Nat's recording is his just capturing the room.
Oh, this
Mahoney.
that's Morris Mahoney. Yeah.
Morris Mahoney. Great. And Arthur Cunin
Yeah.
sitting next to Madeline here. So there's a little raffle that takes place at the end of this. I'm going to go. I'm going to move on to
Okay.
our next clip, moving up in time again as we go. And for folks that are watching, 1986 is when that is. And the way I found this is the way I found a lot of your stuff is just by typing in your name to our search bar and bringing that up.
You didn't try the court records, though.
I didn't do that. No, we'll leave that. So this is we won't play this for very long, but this is the Vermont Television Network. CCTV goes to Montpelier, number 5. So there was some coverage of Montpelier. This is a long hearing, a public hearing on interstate banking. And I'm bringing up this clip here. You can see
How bored I am.
here under one of the stately pictures of someone, and I'm not sure who you're sitting next to there.
Can you?
I'm going to go ahead and play. I'm going to make this big and play. It's going to be a short passage. That was it. That was it. I think that was it.
Here this evening,
But
Yeah.
we're
Well, this is in the Senate.
Chamber represents
I think
over
it's called.
1,400.
This is
room 11.
This is Camden. This is
Vermont Chamber endorses the concept
his
of
brother
interstate
was in the
banking.
legislature when I was there. This is Tom Camden, who
Okay.
was with the Bankers Association, and
Interstate banking.
and so this was. It came before our committee. I was on the Commerce Committee. And so I'm there as a member of the committee. And this is in what was called,
Higher level and quality of financial
it was called Senate Room Number 1. But it's the main, as you come into the State House, it's probably the biggest of the committee rooms, or the biggest.
Yeah, down there next to the Lincoln
Well, right
bust.
next to the Lincoln bust.
Yeah,
On the left.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think it's room 11 now.
Yep.
They may
Oh,
call
okay.
it. Yeah. And there's, I think, Nat behind the camera over
Yeah,
here.
that was probably Dean Davis.
Yeah. So we're having this is a 2-camera shoot. So I'm looking at it now from the point of view of our coverage and certainly the way the legislature is covered today. And just tell us a little bit about this, like what's being discussed at this interstate banking, and why is this important that we have this kind of engagement?
Well, I mean, people decide whether that's Floyd Handy. We just did a little
Yep,
shot
I
of
saw
him.
that. Yep.
Well, I mean, I guess
down here on the end.
yeah.
Yep.
So, I mean, I guess the policy question is, do you run your whole business, your whole state on the basis of domestic, in other words, state banking, or do you open it up for the TD banks and the
Peter Welch.
and this is Obie, who is the chair of the
Michael
of the House Commerce Committee. And that's Paul Harrington, who went on to be head of the Medical Association.
Yeah. And then we did
There
just
I
see
am.
Peter Welch is down here.
Peter Welch,
Oh, there you are.
Yeah.
So what's Peter Welch's role at this point?
Well, he was on the Senate Finance Committee.
Okay.
So that's why he and I think Scudder Parker and Harvey Carter were the kind of the 3 knights of the Senate Finance Committee. And they were all felt pretty much the same. They they were smart people.
So interesting.
I don't know who
You know,
this
this
is.
goes on for quite some time and gives us a little glimpse into how some decisions are being
That looks
made.
like Dick Chapman, but I'm not sure if that is. He worked for IBM. He was a lobbyist for them.
And you're at the table now. I see that you had moved from that back corner over to the table.
Okay.
And
I
it's a
think this
full
is-
house for this conversation. Was Andy in the legislature at that time?
Andy Christensen?
No,
Floyd?
Floyd Handy.
Yeah, he was. Yeah.
He's in the legislature. Also from Burlington.
This guy was from. He was from.
You know this guy? Talio?
Sort of.
Yeah.
He was testifying against it, I think.
Uh-huh.
But the other guy came from Brandon, and I can't remember what his name. Bob? No, I think.
Well, we could go on this, and this is sort of interesting.
I think that's Cheryl Rivers.
Yeah, to look at just from this point of view of a little glimpse into how the rules get made that govern our lives and the people that are making them. So I'm going to jump to something that may be a little more fun for folks.
Well, this
but
is
it's
fun
also,
for
I mean,
this
it
is
is
fun for
fun.
some people that love politics.
But how about this guy, Out?
yeah.
This story. Tell us a little bit about Out.
Well, this is it's a pity Frank can't be here because
Right, yep.
this is Frank Bryan, my co-author. This almost sprang whole from his womb. I would say I gave maybe 10% of the help to this to act as a amanuensis, but it was fun to do, and I think he probably wouldn't have done it alone. So he needed, and we were a pretty good team for 4 books. So I happened to be, maybe I was the only one available to talk about this, but certainly whenever we could, we tried to be there together, and that's what I'm talking about. And I would usually read a passage or two, and then if people had questions, then we'd answer the questions and go on. But I never would do a sustained reading of a passage from a book or for 10 or 15 minutes because people get bored.
Yeah, I'm going to hear a little bit of this now.
Shortly, I'd like to start with a warning. This is a special note to the readers that the book here is about the coming secession of Vermont from the Union in 1991, and it outlines many of the tactics and strategies that may be used in the ultimate Great War of Secession, otherwise known as Tugwass, which is also pronounced shove it. For that reason, it's absolutely critical that the book should never fall into the hands of anyone outside the state of Vermont. Vermonters should use the utmost caution when traveling beyond Vermont's borders. And here comes Frank.
No, you're supposed
Only
to.
start with a special note to the
You have to start without him. So you and Frank Bryan had sort of written this sort of almost a parody around succession.
Well, that was it. That was just the. We just thought. I wish I had those glasses. I love those glasses I had. I don't know what happened. I think I broke them in a dance sometime.
Anyway, Vermonters should use the utmost caution when traveling beyond Vermont's borders with this book. Preferably, the contents should be memorized and the book left at home. It is imperative that the book never appear anywhere within a 100-mile radius of G. Gordon Liddy, in the hands of Teddy Kennedy, on the CBS Evening News, on the front page of USA Today, in the possession of Muammar al-Gaddafi, on Jane Fonda's bookshelf, in Sylvester Stallone's car, anywhere within a 50-mile radius of Washington, D.C., in the editorial offices of the New York Times, in Oliver North's briefcase, or on the coffee table of anyone living in New Hampshire or New York.
So what was the reception that people had to this and your readings? Because we have a couple of readings in the archives, and I have a feeling you did a bunch.
Well, I mean, it actually hit a little bit of a not a nerve, but it had a certain cachet. There was an article in not something like, it wasn't Le Monde, it might have been Le Monde or Perry Match, about the whole secession movement, and there were references to the book. And I don't think our reviews were not, were mostly Vermont. They were not around, I don't think anything, the Times or the Post, but there would be references to it. And it struck the chord of any state, whether it was Texas or others, who thought, well, maybe we ought to get out. And but we didn't push it, or I didn't push it, because there was a group that came along after us,
Yeah.
the Vermont Secession Movement, and
Yep.
I just thought that was just too much of a stretch. I mean,
Yeah.
I was going on to other things.
Yeah.
I was teaching school.
Well, this has a kind of humorousness to pointing out a little bit of exceptionalism.
Well, I like this
around-
part. I mean, just watching the interaction between us
Yeah.
is
Yeah. And then, of course, certainly the second secession movement had some dubious ties to Italian secessionism and
yeah.
sort of
No,
neo-
I thought the problem was they just got
Yeah.
too serious. They
Yeah.
took them, and they had a flag, and so that's
I
what
think-
I've done with a lot of my books. Just move on. I mean,
Yeah.
and
And I think some of this was about what, if I remember right, is, Frank Bryan has a strong sense of Vermont history, certainly in Vermont culture, and understanding that, and really calling out the best parts of that
yeah.
in a way. And this book helped highlight that.
Well, I think it was always kind of I won't say a funny partnership. It was an odd couple, but one that worked over the years. And I liked him as a person. He liked me as a person, and we were. It wasn't as if he was a MAGA Republican and I was Students for a Democratic Society. I mean, we were, reasonably close in the middle, and we found enough space in these literary playgrounds to bring our respective perspectives. And I think there were times we really fed off each other. And so when we were writing the goat book, that was just throwing
What was
these.
the goat book?
Oh, that was Real Vermonters Don't Milk Goats.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Oh, it sold
I do remember that.
70,000 copies.
Yeah, I do
More
remember
than one for every 10 people in Vermont.
that. Yeah.
So it was really, that put us on the map. That's what got me elected to the
I do
legislature.
remember that, yep. So that's 1987.
Okay.
And I'm going to just pause that there. You and Frank Bryan reading from Out,
Yep.
Attempt to Succession. And then we are going to jump up here to 2013. So we've skipped over a whole,
Oh, yeah.
almost a
Good.
decade. And this is the rededication of memorial plaques in Burlington's Memorial Auditorium.
Great. Terrific.
So let's
And I'll
see.
invite Bill Maris up to come and introduce the rest of our speakers, as well as talk himself.
I think that a couple of people are going to speak, and then I've got a few closing remarks to make. The first is Larry Baxter, a veteran, a member of my parish, and a contributor to this cause. He agreed to say a few remarks. Larry?
And I guess that's all we're going to get from you right now.
Oh, okay.
But I'm going to
Bill Mears know how difficult it is to say no.
So tell us a little bit about what's happening here, and of course, where are these memorial plaques now that Memorial Auditorium is
Well,
shuttered?
these are still on the walls, and there are. I don't know if they've hung them all. There may be some more that are down. There's my wife,
Yeah.
and that's
Well, Maggie Luger's and
no, that's is it? No, I think it's Maggie.
Maggie Luger's there, and then Diane.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, another collaboration I had with Bill Lipke, who taught art history at UVM.
Okay, great.
And we, you don't have to, all the background, but he was very interested in First World War monuments, and had lost one of these academic races with a woman from the University of British Columbia to get. There's a big collection of stuff at the National Museum in Ottawa, but Canadian participation in World War I. And this woman won the battle of getting the first book published. And then, so he put all his stuff in a file, and he let me see some of it. And I said, look, you should do your own book, and I'll help you do it. So this is 2012, I guess. And plus, what we can do is we can make some comparisons between the American Civil War, which is now in the sesquicentennial, or no, now it's in its, what do I want to say? It's sesquicentennial, and the First World War was in the centennial. And we'll make these comparisons between how the respective Western governments honored their dead. So we did. So we wrote this book, and it expanded to include not just stuff in France and in Britain, but here in Vermont. So we had a whole chapter on Vermont stuff. And then we realized that Memorial Auditorium, these plaques were done after the First World War. And subsequently, they had plaques not as elaborate as these for the Second World War, for the Korean War, and then for Vietnam. But these things are about 300 pounds, 350 pounds of brass.
Yep.
And each of them has about 90 names on it. And so we went out and raised enough money to get them to be cleaned and rehung, because they were out of sight. No one knew where they were. They were somewhere up on the walls,
Yep.
but they only went up to the O's. We said, well, where are the rest?
Okay.
So we finally went with one of the custodians, and in the basement found a stack of them. And we said, come on, let's get them back up there. So we raised the money and put them back up, and this is the guy who's the custodian there.
Yeah, Richard Bailey.
Richard
right?
Bailey,
Yeah,
great guy.
He did 242 for a while.
Yeah.
So he found the plaques for you. What's going to happen?
Well, I found them with one of the custodians.
Got it. And so what's going to happen next? Are you going to stay involved in this? Or
Well, Brian Pine has promised me that I'll be on whatever committee is going to decide about what happens.
Great.
And I have not said, you must do X and Y, but I have made at least my urgent plea that there be some way of preserving at least some of them.
Yeah. Well,
But that's a lot. I mean, that's a lot of brass.
Yeah. Not to toot the horn of CCTV, because it's nothing, but it's pretty cool that this is here to help tell this story, to carry the story forward.
Well, and the other thing about the Memorial Auditorium was built in the middle of what was called the Living Memorial Movement after the First World War, because people were tired of simply having statuaries on the town green or elaborate tombstones. And so there was this movement that said, let's make memorials that are devoted to the living and the future and not just looking back at the past. And so many of the things, there were a lot of, so when you go around the country and you see such and such as a memorial auditorium, well, that's the point. The point is to keep using the construction of that and you can think about why, when it was dedicated, and for whom.
And are you involved in any attempts with the redevelopment of Memorial Auditorium now?
Well, only that I asked Brian if he formed a committee. I would like to be on it. He said yes.
Yeah.
He says, I know you care about the plaques.
Yeah. Great. Well, that's so there we are in 2013, and again, there's a bunch going on there, but let's skip over here too. I think we got two more. We have this, which is taking place in this very studio. You're involved with the Vermont Council on World Affairs.
Yeah.
And let's hear just a second of what you have to say here.
So that's good. And you try to bid on things that align with, if you will, Vermont verticals, things that Vermont, you mentioned women in politics and agriculture, and I know energy has been an issue, especially alternative energy, the green environment. That Vermont is known for those things, and you try to do that.
Yeah, I mean, we don't try to get out over our skis and bid on something where there's no infrastructure, no intrinsic state interest in it. Yeah, and so if you look at the list of applicants, it's, well, only Patricia can talk about how many different options there are, but it really is like, this is darts at a board, or educated dart throwing, right?
Thank you.
You're not wrong.
Yeah. Let me throw in one, a very interesting one. You would imagine sustainability, agriculture, and things like this. But talk about comics and graphic novels. We have a group coming. Yeah.
That's right.
Go ahead.
Well, so we just put the proposal together.
Vermont Council on World Affairs, and we do some work with them as well. What was your involvement at this time in Vermont Council on World Affairs?
Well, I was on the board.
Yeah.
And Eric and I think we were on there because we were co-chairs. Eric did most of the work. It's kind of like working with Frank. Eric did most of the work. I was just a pretty face. But I've been raised in a family that cared about what was going on in the world. And so I'd always been interested in world affairs. And I was on the World Affairs Council back in the 70s. And then there was a gap, and then someone asked me to be back on it maybe 2010. And then, so Eric and I were on the board. And you know, it was fun to host a whole variety of groups, and we were sustained by the monies we got usually from the government, to host foreign students or foreign visitors. And so the comic book reference was a group of Russians. This was 2013, 14, something like that. And they were very energetic. I mean, it was before Putin was really put the screws to them, and they were showing us brought some of their work, and they were talking to, I think that's one of my jars.
I know. Well, I brought this up because on the table, I think we have the House of Fermentology and a jar of your honey.
And I think this is on
and
my
maybe
comb,
some
honey.
honeycomb there.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit. I mean, we've alluded to the House of Fermentology. We've mentioned beekeeping. What is your true passion in life?
My wife.
Well, then, a good answer.
Well, I think a variety. I mean,
Yeah.
I've done the bees for 50 years.
Yeah.
And I never was, I wrote a book about beer and how the home brewer gets carried away with this hobby and wants eventually to have his or her own brewery. And finally, I was able to do that with
You're okay.
with Todd, and he was the brewer. I was just a pretty face. But
I've heard that a few times. I think that work comes much more easily to you than you think. But
well, it's true.
Yeah.
I mean, it is true. I mean, I'm a subordinate creature. I don't mind. I mean,
Yeah.
my wife married beneath her. So, but it was really, it was fun to prove in a way that we could make a good beer and sell it. And then we sold it to Foam. So it's now a subsidiary of Foam, and
Still
I'm
exists,
back
but
to-
not with
And
your...
I don't make any more beer.
Yeah.
Drink a lot.
Yeah. And so you were on the Vermont Council of World Affairs board for a little while. Again,
Yep.
this is an organization that does exchanges between people from all around the world,
Right.
and they do these exchanges around journalism, around media production, around, and they're really about democracy building
Yeah.
and people-to-people
Oh, yeah.
relations,
Yeah, yeah, it's-
supported in large part by the State Department and private funds.
Yeah.
And Patricia Preston, of course, here is their executive director.
And she still is.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then Tom Torty, who ran the Lake Champlain Chamber for years until he stepped down.
Yeah, we used to rent space from them, from the chamber,
Yeah.
and before COVID, and so he was a big supporter of the council.
So we're going to close this out, and we're going to look at this one last one, which a little closer to home, our little slice of heaven here in Burlington, that gets flooded every year, as the climate changes and the weather patterns shift and change. And you're telling a story here in support of the Intervale Center.
Farmhouse, and so it was a time.
And
when
I'm going to
people
just
were
rewind a
doing
little
back
bit,
to the
and
land
we'll
thing.
tease people with this
So
story,
we
and then
dipped
if
our
you want to
toes
watch,
into-
I'm going to tease people with this story a little bit, but if you want to watch
this
it.
This is the TED Talk there down there.
Say that again?
It was our TED Talk. There were 5 of us, I think, giving talks about the Intervale and our work there.
Yeah, and storytelling. And so if folks want to watch the whole of this, they can go to cctv.org and MARES, type that in, and you'll find this.
Thank you all for coming. This is an incredible turnout. Thank you all for supporting the Intervale. I was raised in Texas in a very small town. In fact, it was so small that the welcome and goodbye signs were on the same post. I had a horse, and my brothers and I had chickens. And that was our outdoor activities until about 20 years later, when my wife and I moved to St. Johnsbury. And I was working for a newspaper across the river in New Hampshire, and we were living in this old rundown farmhouse, and so it was a time when people were doing back to the land things. And so we dipped our toes into a sheep and a large garden and what else? Chickens, bees, and I made a lot of homebrew, not very well. But the 2 things that stuck, for me anyway, were the beer, which is not tonight's subject, and also the bees.
All right, beer and the bees, yeah. So if folks want to watch the rest of that, you're going to keep talking there. And the funny thing about this is I remember, I didn't shoot this. This was recorded by Barry Silver, who used to do our marketing and now works at Champlain College, but I edited it.
Oh.
So I think it's kind of apropos. I do remember doing the titles on this in 2017 or 2018 when this was recorded.
Well, I'm glad I kept my back straight, and and I
good job.
Had not too many uhs, and
well, I think it was a night of pretty interesting storytelling on everyone's behalf. So, Bill, this has been really interesting, and I will just close it out to say that this last one was 2018, but if I do go over to our page here, again, doing this search, you'll see that we're already here, 2024. This program is already in the archives, waiting to be produced.
All right.
So that's pretty cool.
So how many references are there? About 7 or 8?
There are about 7 or 8 references that you're in. What is your wife's name?
Chris Hadsel.
No, there's a Teresa Mares that's in here.
Yeah,
so you don't
same
share
spelling.
The last name, yeah.
But she's Spanish and I'm Czech.
Yeah, great.
So
well, thanks for. Is there any last parting words that you have for folks about if they were to look back at themselves and what's it like for you to look back at yourself and view these clips?
Well, some I seem more intelligent than I really am. Well, everybody is falsely modest about. Most people are. And but I think I have been on stage enough that I know the difference between fishing for a compliment and just delivering.
Yeah.
And so most of these are pretty good. They're all in the second category.
Yeah. I mean, I think you've been in proximity to some pretty interesting moments in our history and some pretty interesting people, and you've created some pretty remarkable things, both in your books and in your products.
You want to see my new website?
Share. I do want to see your new website. All right, so what's up next?
I just finished it yesterday.
So let's see what's next with Bill Mares.
All right,
Go ahead.
so you want to do just capital B, ILL hyphen MARES.com.
All right, BillMares.com. There you are. So what's going on here, and what's next for you in this?
So you have to look at these. I think these are pretty cool, though. Yeah, look at the. Okay, you let them.
I gotta just do this for a second, because, there we go, yeah.
Okay, that's the second one.
So are we gonna look at these photos? Is this
Yeah,
you?
that's me. Okay.
All right.
So then you go to the next one. Okay.
So this is in your journalism days?
This is my journalism days. Yeah.
Where were you working?
Chicago.
Got it.
Okay, the next one. That's crossing Arabia on camel. That's learning to play the bagpipes.
Where did you learn to play the bagpipes?
Here in
Scotland?
Vermont.
Oh, here in Vermont?
St. Johnsbury.
Yeah,
That's beekeeping.
yeah. Removing a swarm.
Yep. That's catching fish in Quebec. That's running the Boston Marathon. That's my family without grandchildren.
Awesome.
And that's me and the dog.
Fantastic. So this is, you are working on a book. Are you working on a book?
Yeah.
Or you're
it's
just
gonna be this one.
better to be lucky than smart.
That's what's coming up in the summer.
Fantastic. See all books.
And
by
then,
Bill Ayers.
if you go to here, to books,
Yeah.
okay, so you get all the books here.
These are your books.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then you go down and you can choose, go down, should be able to go down. No. Oh, this is
back.
just,
This
you
is
know, if
where
you want to
you can-
buy
if you
them,
wanna buy
but
'em,
if you
yep.
go scroll down, you can pick any book there and open it up. So that one, do that one. So that's about going across Arabia on the camel.
Fantastic. Have you always written about your, do you write all the time?
Do I write what?
You write all the time?
Yeah.
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 All right. So this is billmayers.com.
Well, it has to be.
Bill with a
I'm still
hyphen.
trying. It
Yeah.
has to be Bill with a hyphen.
Yeah.
But here's the book. Go on down to the bottom again. See, here's the book I did with Lipke about the memorials.
Yep.
So this tells about it, and then this happened to be St. Albans.
You've led a life of curiosity as well as
Yeah. Oh yeah.
creation.
Yeah.
And that is probably one of the most important things we can do, right?
Yep.
Is lead with our curiosity. Bill Mayers, thank you so much
Yeah.
for joining
fun.
us with the CCTV Time Machine, and thank you all for watching. Again, if you want to dig into the archives and see if you can find yourself, or if you want to bring somebody on to discuss with them their history in the archives, we welcome that as well. CCTV Time Machine, you can look at cctv.org, and thanks for watching.
Great. Thanks,
Great.
Megan. That's
Thanks.
great.
All right.